Hey guys, it's me, EODGamer here, and in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you the top Eidolons to get for almost every single limited character in the game, and I of course will also explain like why I think they are much better, why I think a lot of them are worse, but by and large, like to give you a TLDR, and as you can see here in the background, I'm not saying Zila's the best, it's just one of my many mistakes that I made in my financial decisions, but I want to just say across the board for any of you who are here for a very super high level summary, in general, I think that the lowest value of an Eidolon comes especially after E3. So anything to do with like E6, E4, these tend to be a lot lower value, and one thing you must consider is because E3 and E5 pretty much don't change anything a character does. It's not game breaking, it's just additional multipliers, which yeah, is significant, but I would also argue that it's kind of useless if you don't care about a little bit more multipliers of like 4% or like some characters like 0 point something. So what that means, effectively, E4 is kind of like 2 Eidolons, and E6 is kind of like 2 Eidolons on its own because you need to pass the 3rd and the 5th. So by and large, across the board, I would say in terms of value, in terms of most characters' value, it really caps off at E1 and E2 where you get the most bang for your buck. I'll give you a TLDR, and no character in the game is absolutely broken at E6. Used to be, the only character that I felt that was absolutely broken in the CBT2 back in 2022. He wasn't out for the CBT3 of course, so we only could confirm it when the game went live. Blade was the only one that had the only busted E6 where he basically couldn't die. Of course they patched it, if not they would have been making another mistake like Bennett in Genshin Impact. But I think that's a good thing. Balanced characters make the game more fun for free to play, and whales don't get bored of the game too easily, so they will keep spending as the game goes by. So that being said, who do I think first? Let me give you 3. Who are the top characters to go Eidolons for? And I think the easiest out of them to mention is Imbibitor Lune. If you don't care about this character, just bear with me. I'm just going to go through quickly why I think certain Eidolons are super strong. For those of you who don't know, Imbibitor Lune, what he is known for, if you maybe don't play him, he uses a lot of skill points. He uses 3 skill points every time it's his turn to do his enhanced basic attacks. His ult gives him back a bit of refund so that he can use less skill points. What it means is he drinks tons of it. So he needs characters, for example, like Sparkle in the same team to funnel some skill points into him, or maybe Battery, like Tingyun battering into him and blah blah blah. Imbibitor Lune is a character that really loves his Eidolon 2. Not Eidolon 1, the one that people are focusing on is the E2. After using Ultimate, Danheng Imbibitor Lune's action is advanced forward by 100% and gains 1 extra stack, which makes him even more skill point positive. You straight away move immediately, means you get like something like a double turn where you can immediately enhance basic attack, which makes your energy funnelers like Tingyun, like Ho and other characters so much more efficient. This is a game changer, absolute game changer for this character. Compared to like his E1 is like okay, but the one that is really really crucial, probably his best Eidolon, is E2. Most people in the Imbibitor Lune community will echo the same thing. This is probably one of the best Eidolons in the game right now. Another character that I think is very very strong, probably I'll rank as like number 2, would be a character like Kafka. I personally don't have this Eidolon, but I think Kafka is very good because her E1 and E2 both gives so much value. So if you think about Kafka's kit, she can be played both as a DPS and a support at the same time. So she can be played either one. If you play, for example, with Black Swan, Kafka becomes more of like a popper, applies a little bit of DOT, but no longer being the massacre kind of DPS. She could be if you wanted to, and also scales with other new DOT characters being added into the game. E1 and E2 is fantastic because E1, you can see here, when she does that follow-up zappy with a gun on the unit, they'll increase the amount of DOT received by 30%, which is like damage amp. And her E2, I'm not going to bother pronouncing these words, but when Kafka's on the field, DOT basically increased by 25%. It makes her a very supportive character, playing into the whole thematic of DOT as well, making her an anchor in the many years or months, however long you're planning to play to come. She likely will remain relevant. And great design also. Both Imbibitor Lune and Kafka, great designs for their respective audiences that are interested in them. So I named 2 characters. I struggled quite long to think of the one that I want to rank as 3rd. I was thinking Runmei because I think it makes a lot of sense. But let's give shout out to a bit older of a character, since probably people might even have a E0. And in my opinion, that character probably is Silverwolf. For those of you who play her, her ultimate is very very strong. She does a massive amounts of defense breaking. So does Pella, but her ult here does good amounts of damage as well, Silverwolf. She drops in enemy resistance down. But the thing is, this rest down lasts for many turns, especially if you're fighting like one target. What you want to do is just put the resistance down and like basic attack, so you get a lot of the skill point refund for the rest of your team. If there are multiple enemies, yes, you could justify like dropping multiple weaknesses into multiple units, but most of the time, it's because you're trying to get your out up. You want a lot of uptime on this ultimate ability, user ban, because it does good amounts of damage, and really this is like huge amounts of defense shredding. In my opinion, like one of the best Eidolons in the game is E1 for Silver Wolf, because it regenerates so much energy for this character. Let me just narrate it for you, for any of you who are just listening to this video in the background. Silver Wolf regenerates 7 energy for every debuff target enemy has. Stacks up to 5 times in each out. That is a 7 times 5, 35 energy refund each time you cast the out. Her out is only 110, which means it's already practically a 30% energy refund, and which is very huge, taking her to will be one of the lowest energy burst cost required characters in the game, basically outing almost every single other turn here and there. I think it's super strong. E1 Silver Wolf is not to be trifled with, especially if you combo with other energy restoration light cones. Like this one here, the before the tutorial mission start is an event light cone, but this one gives even more, meaning you practically will have her burst up so often. Otherwise, there are a few others I think that give a bit of energy, like the free-to-play solitary healing gives a bit here and there, but it requires a certain niche condition. But overall, I think it's a pretty solid look for Silver Wolf. So that's my top 3. In very close third, I was thinking about it for a while. I'll give it to Runmei, and this is the character that I initially wanted to talk about as number 3. I'll tell you why she's like so good in terms of Eidolons, is because her E1 here ignores enemy's defense, and I think this is like her most critical Eidolon, E1. And if any of you at any point you feel like you want to add in a bit, feel free to like leave a comment below. I'm only one man, I won't be able to like know everything at all times by the back of my head. As you can see, I'm a relatively small spender as well, not having like E6 everything. So that is one downside of being a content creator without unlimited cash. Here, Neuronic Embroidery. When Ultimate Field is deployed, damage dealt by all allies ignores 20% of target's defense. This is tremendously strong. This not only applies to your crit damage dealers, it applies to your DOT damage dealers, follow-up attackers, whatever not. It plays into the true thematic of Runmei, who really fits into every single team. I think E1 is tons of value for this defense ignore. On top of that, her E2 is nice, but I don't think it's as strong as the E1. Here is just like 40% additional damage, which I don't think is super critical. In my opinion, Runmei like caps off at E1, and thereafter like E4, E6 is more or less, I think, personally, I think unnecessary. I likely won't go towards that angle. E1, in my opinion, is like the best. So we talked about a few. Since Sparkle's on the banner right now, this is a new character for me. So let's read the E1 and E2 real quick, and we'll take a quick look at E4 as well to see anything's like super critical. Cypher's buff lasts for 1 additional turn, have attack increased by 40%. I don't really care too much about attack percentage, it's quite easy to find. Every stack of the talent effect allows allies to additionally ignore 8% of the target's defense when dealing damage. I think this is very strong. E2 Sparkle seems to be very good in my opinion, much more than E1, which is a little bit more expensive than Runmei, but of course, both of them are equally strong. I think it's like E2 is, in my opinion, like slightly better. E4 recovers 1 more out. Talent can has max. I think E4, in my opinion, is like quite a big changer, because now you can add up to like 8 skill points. You have even more skill point positivity. And here, let me just see this real quick. Crit damage is additionally increased. Use a skill. By any skill boosted, spread the allies. I think this is also quite strong. It is good, but can you justify the E3 and E5 costing like two whole new characters? I don't think so. For that, I think E4 is probably in my opinion like best bang for my buck. E2 is probably where I think is good, but E0 Sparkle works really fine as well in my opinion. Next we have Huo. I'm just jumping from characters now because the rest of them are all like okay. I don't think anything is like super critical. Duration of Divine Provision, extend 1 turn, all ally speed by 12%, nothing critical. Huo is also nothing much. Like E1 and E2, I don't think it's like super important as well. E4, yeah, it's honestly E4 and it's for healers hard to justify. I think the only character that I actually bothered looking at the Eidolons for was Luota. So Huo in summary, I think E0 is like way good enough. You have Luota, in my opinion, is like quite good. E1 is trash, you get slight 20%. I pulled it because I was probably on a high from when Honkai Star was still launching, so I was still in that adrenaline mode of randomly pulling. I don't really like E2 too much. It is versatile where you can get a shield, so he's technically an abundance and a preservation, but not enough to justify like this nuance. What is really good about Luota is he's very backloaded in his Eidolons. His value really comes from E4 and E6, which is so expensive. When Luota is active, enemies deal less damage. And when E6 here, ultimate is used, 100% fixed chance to reduce enemies' resistances for 2 turns. Ranmei, of course, already has it in a kit, but he's an abundance character and pretty strong if you can lower enemies' attacks and also lower their res, plus buff your own attack too. Very versatile character, Luota too. And his fail also can't be cleansed or purged by enemies, so that is something that is pretty nice, especially if it's a fail application of things. But I think Luota is like good enough at E0 in my opinion. Since we talked about Huohuo, Luota, and it makes only sense that we talk about Fucc now, right? Eidolons for Fucc that are strong. I think E1 is strong. 30% crit damage is very good. But generally, people play Fucc in many teams. They play her in like crit teams. For example, even like follow-up teams, DOT teams. This crit damage is really only benefiting your DPS characters that can crit. And of course, like, I don't think every single character will benefit from this, which is why I don't really like crit damage as much as crit rate for the most part, personally at least. E2, not super important. I think this is like so-so. Definitely E1 is her strongest out of like E1 and E2. And E4 I don't think is like super good. E6 also is like not, it turns her into like more of a DPS. So Fucc, good at E0. E1 probably is where I'll stop. This still is quite a big amount of crit damage buffing. But you have to see in isolation. In isolation, 30% crit damage buffing might not be worth skipping, for example, a signature like Cone 4 and other stuff, which is why I think, for me, I'll rate Fucc as like good at E0 in my opinion. So, how many have we talked about? It's like tons of mouthful so far, and if you're finding value in this video so far, do give me a like, subscribe, and leave a comment below who are the characters that you're actually looking out and listening for, so that I'll know exactly who to focus on in future whenever we make those rerun videos. So we finished like the top 2 rows here. Let's talk a bit about the other characters in the game. Since we talked a bit about Imbibity Lune, let's talk about some of the other DPSs in the game. And let's start off first with Jingliu, another very popular DPS. When using her out or enhanced skill, Jingliu's crit damage increases by 24% for 1 turn. If only 1 enemy is attacked, the target will be additionally dealt more damage. I really like this. It turns Jingliu's deficits around. It's the same reason why I felt Argentine is much stronger than other Erudition characters, is because most of the downside of splash damage comes that the multipliers are split into the splashes. If it's all concentrated on one unit, then it becomes very different. It means that they scale better also with lesser units on the field. So here crit damage 24% is very strong. You get additional bonus if you hit only 1 target, which is also really good. I like E1 quite a lot. Next, E2, using ultimate increases the damage of Nyx's enhanced skill by 80%. These are massive multipliers. Definitely you will feel the difference between these two. But for the sake of, I think E1 probably is where I would stop. But E0 already, Jingliu works very well. I think what's more important for Jingliu is actually her signature Light Cone. So if any of you are ever thinking of like Eidolons for Jingliu, 1 and 2 both quite strong. But this one probably is more important because of the ability for her to proc these max stacks and the defense ignore so fast. Jingliu without and with her signature Light Cone definitely does feel a lot different in my opinion, especially since there aren't many Light Cones with crit rate, crit damage in them. Another character of destruction, so we talked about Imbibity Lune at the start, talk about Jingliu. Now let's talk about Blade. This is a character who used to be super strong in CBT 2 for his Eidolons. They nerfed it a lot, and right now I don't think it's super great. Like it deals that increased damage to a single target equal to a certain number of HP. So this is nice. It does a little bit more damage, but again, I don't think it's like critical for his playstyle. Hellscape state, his crit rate increases by 15%. This is like the Fucc one, just crit, and it's only for himself. He technically is in his Hellscape state like most of the time. So this 15% crit is very generous, and his crit rate is of course a lot better too. And one thing to note is his Light Cone here also gives crit rate. So if you have 18% here, 15% from his E2, you are more often than not going to have a lot of crit rate on him, which then you will be struggling to find that crit damage element from this character. I rather for example, his Trace here giving him like a bit of, his Eidolon giving a bit of crit damage instead. But this is still a pretty decent one if you like playing Blade. Very versatile character, probably one of the best win DPSs in the game currently. He is probably at the only limited 5-star right now. I really like him a lot. But I think he works fine at E0, 15% crit rate. I don't think it's a game changer or anything to plop into two limited characters into both of them. HP drops, stacks his max HP by 20%. I can see some gimmicks from this by manipulating his HP. But then again, E6 here is the one that is quite attractive. It used to be way better where he basically couldn't die. Now it reduces his charge stacks to 4, so it's a 20% faster of him to like get his counter stacks, which means he is probably able to self-sustain much better because he does heal like 25% of his HP every time he does the enhanced follow-up attack. And his additional follow-up attack triggered now additionally increases damage by 50% of his max HP, which is probably around like 4k? 4k HP, is it at 8? My blade, yeah, about 4k, which is not too bad, but I think this character is good enough at E0 as well, in my opinion. Dr. Ratio, he's a free character, so everyone would have him at E0, but more interestingly is, do you want to go for his Eidolons? Max stackable count of trace summation is increased by 4. When a battle begins, immediately obtains 4 stacks of summation. I think this is really, really strong. When his talent follow-up hits a target, for every debuff the target has, additionally deals imaginary additional damage to 20% of Dr. Ratio's attack. This effect can be triggered for a maximum of 4 times during each follow-up. I think it's like pretty strong. The enemies generally will have quite a lot of debuffs because you'll probably build him in like a debuff focused teams, and you get again like a bit of additional damage per debuff, which is definitely quite interesting. I don't think it's very necessary. He's already a free character, which means that if you plop down an Eidolon or something on him, means you're like eroding that value that you really get from a total free character. Dr. Ratio, probably a free character, stay at E0. Even light cones, I think cruising the Stealthy is like super strong as well. You get tons of crit rate already. Not, in my opinion, worth like removing his free-to-play status into a E1 or anything. At least that's my personal thought. And Hunt characters are not exactly super usable in both content currently that we have in the game. That is my thoughts for these characters so far. Zealer, another Hunt character. I have E6, definitely a bad decision. If I could rewind time, I would like a refund on like at least 4 of these Eidolons. The first one here, dealing damage to enemies whose HP percentage is 80% or lower, crit rate increases by 15%. Some of you might look at this and say, this is exactly the same like Blade's E2. Very, very strong, but actually no. This is actually very, very bad. Let me explain why. Most of the time when you're playing Zealer and you're one-shotting enemies, you need to guarantee that kill. To act again. Chances are they won't have someone that did damage so that they are less than 80% where Zealer can one-shot, because she's probably going to be one of your faster moving characters, especially if you're not running slow Zealer in some Bronyer team composition. What this means is that she will not be getting this crit rate bonus when you're striking that target, when you're trying to one-shot them. It only comes into play when you're striking an already dead enemy or like going to die enemy that she probably will one-shot anyway, but to bring a bit more consistency with this 15% crit rate, or hitting a boss monster over time. So this is not as good as it sounds. I much rather, for example, this also be crit damage, because crit rate is just like consistency, which you can just do very simply, like just restarting the run if you're just like aiming for squishies. Crit damage would have been tremendously good. I don't really like the E1. E2 is when I think this is very, very strong. Out of all of the Eidolons in the game for DPS character, this probably, other than in Bibetolunis E2, makes a lot of sense for Zealer. And the reason for that is because it combos very nicely with her light cone. You need both stacks of her E2 to just nice hit this threshold here of this effect can stack up to 6 times for Zealer. Because for those of you who don't know, her base speed is 115. 20% times 20% of this plus another 20% of this, you will hit that 160 threshold, which is just nice for a signature light cone, and you don't even need speed boots then. So that is the nice part about her E2. In my opinion, probably like Zealer's best Eidolon, if you care about any of that. Again, E4 is just for continuously combo. This is nice quality of life to keep striking an enemy, but you have to kill a target, and E1 doesn't help. But of course, E6 here is the one that is like the most longest wall of attacks. This just basically adds like some sort of like debuff to the enemies. Every time your teammate attacks, they just take a bit of damage. Looks more impressive than it sounds. In reality, it sucks balls. I regret it so much. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Zealer. Next up, we have... Well, we are actually going through characters very, very quickly. And I don't even have anyone that is under these levels. So nice. We are left with, I think, 2 more, right? If I'm not wrong. I have Argenti, Topaz, and Jingyuan. Okay, so we have 3. Jingyuan. Who do I want to talk about first? Let's say the Jingyuan, since it's on the banner right now. I think that Jingyuan is a character that his light cone is very, very strong. if you were to look at this character and you want to build him, probably go for the Light Cone first before considering the Eidolons. Lightning Lord attacks damage multipliers on enemy adjacent increases. You have more splash damage, which is nice for an Erudition character, I guess, but not super game breaking. E2, after Lightning Lord takes action, damage caused by Jingyuan's basic attack, skill and ultimate increases by 20% for 2 turns. Again, I don't think this is like tremendously strong. It's just a 20% increase and you're spending one whole entire character for it. Rather, you get like Run Mace E1, you get that defense ignore, so much more different, right? And it can be used for any character as well. Whereas this is like really doubling down on like one particular single character. And talking about E4, each hit regenerates more energy, means he just outs faster, better refund. You can get by with just slotting in an E0 Sparkle. You basically funnel the energy that you need into Jingyuan also, so it's like not much difference. You can save like 4 Eidolons if you care about this. Each hit performed by Lightning Lord in his E6, when it takes action, will make the enemy target vulnerable. While vulnerable, enemies receive a little bit more damage until the end of turn, stacking up to 3 times, just slight more damage increase. I don't think it's worth how much money you're spending for this. 6 limited characters, yeah, it's a little bit pricey in my opinion. Topaz, or let's talk about Argenti first. Topaz, let's leave it for last, since it might be more interesting to talk about another male character right beside Jingyuan. So we have each stack of Apotheosis additionally increases crit damage by 4%. I think this is strong. Crit damage is always much more welcome, in my opinion, for DPS characters, if he's buffing themselves. If the number of enemies on the field equals to 3 or more when the ultimate is used, attack increases by 40%. Attack, I don't really like. I think it's so-so. You can get it from a lot of sources of characters like cones as well. Not very difficult to find, which is why I think crit damage here is much better. And also because it's like multiplicative. E1 probably is where I'll stop for Argenti if I were to go for it at all. Here at the start of battle, gains 2 stacks of Apotheosis and increases the max stacks. Okay, not too bad, but it's still very expensive. E6 is where, of course, it gets super good value. You ignore 30%. Not good value, but it's really strong. You ignore 30% of the enemy target's defense. Unfortunately, it's capped behind an E6. You could get just an E1 Runmei with 20%, which is like good enough value at a much cheaper rate. Like so much cheaper. That's why I think like Runmei is like one of the most good bang value for your buck. It's because you look at all these Eidolons and you look at your support characters. Like, why don't you just put it on a character that can buff your whole entire team instead? So don't care what DPS you're looking for. So that is for Argenti. Next character, and last but not least, is Topaz and Nambi, which probably might be coming up sometime soon. That's why I wanted to also leave her for the last one. Let's talk about her overall stuff. Enemies inflicted with Proof of Debt receive follow-up attacks. They will enter a debtor state and can only effect basically once in a single attack. Increases the crit damage of follow-up attacks inflicted on the targets. So this is a supportive ability which increases the damage that the enemy takes. This is very strong since follow-up attacks so far, other than Herta and Himiko, okay, I mean most of them are half-half, but the ones that do a lot of damage tend to be like single target in nature. So having this on like one boss enemy and your Doctor Ratio smacks, your Topaz and Nambi follow-ups and stuff like that is a lot of damage that you're doing on a single target. I like this quite a bit. I think E1 is definitely worth it if you have the resources. Nambi takes action, Topaz regenerates more energy. This is also very strong. Gives her a lot more refund. What does the energy burst cost anyway? 130 is very high, so a 5 energy restoration is definitely very welcome. I think both E1 and E2 are excellent for this unit that is semi-support, semi-DPS, pretty good. After Nambi turn begins, Topaz action advanced by 20%, this is also very strong, and Nambi's attack count during the Windfall Bonanza stays increased by 1. Rest Pen, I think E6 is like so-so. To me, I think E1, E2 is both good value. Both of them I could see myself getting if I wanted to play like a follow-up team and I like Topaz's design. E4 is strong too because it helps Topaz move more, gives more energy and helps her get her uptime on the out and stuff like that. E6 is a bit expensive for that just one additional one. Rest Pen is of course nice, but I think you can get a lot cheaper Rest Pens in other places rather than like E6 of a single unit. And yeah, that comes to my whole conclusion on my thoughts basically about all these characters. I don't know everything. Some of you might definitely know more about a particular character than I do. If you have any questions or any comments you want to add on, I think a lot of people will like value coming from you guys too. Leave in the comments below and check out these other videos where I actually talked about, is it then better to pull for more Eidolons or more characters, which actually makes more sense. And anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. Check out these video and see you in the next one.